And I think a lot of people hit that point, no matter what they're going through. Or in my situation, I always say it's like you go through this element of when you have a business that doesn't work out, you go through this element of what do I do next? But you also feel like that next step is definitely not a 9 to 5, because you know in your heart that you're called for something great. And I really believe that entrepreneurship is something great. Like, if you're called for that, if you're supposed to, your job is to help as many people as you can get to where they're going. And invariably, it will help you get where you're going. Right. But it's a passion that you have to be able to help people. And I love what you're talking about in terms of being able to tell other entrepreneurs, listen, once you clear this, you'll be able to accelerate at a different rate. What does that look like for the people that you're helping now once they get past that block? Like, what does it look like on the other side? Hello,
Sounds good.
everyone, and thank you for joining us today on today's podcast of Entrepreneurial Truth. On today's show, we have Dr. Alja, and I will let her get into her story, how she started, her journey, and a little bit about who she is. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. So, yeah, first, thank you for having me. So, I am Alja Podgornik, for those of you who want to get the proper pronunciation of everything, because that's always a question I get. And I come originally from Slovenia. And actually, my background is in academia. So, I'm a neuroscientist by education. I spent almost 10 years in neuroscience, studying all the way through a PhD. So, I hold a PhD in neuroscience as well. And basically, while I was doing my PhD, I went through a very big healing crisis myself that was, preceded with some other experiences and so on, that kind of prompted me to really shift like the way I was looking at the world, how I was like attempting things. And it basically faced me with the reality that, Western science didn't know everything. Western medicine couldn't help with everything, even though I studied that system for many years prior. And that actually made me actually embark on a very different journey of healing myself first. And I studied natural healing, like different modalities from Ayurveda to traditional Chinese medicine, etc. And basically 2 years into my PhD, I started realizing that what I thought my life path was going to be was not going to be my life path. I wasn't meant to stay in academia. It wasn't actually giving me the fulfillment that I was looking for. And so I started my first business, and actually wanting to share what I learned about natural health and healing modalities and sharing that with people. And this was back in 2020, 2021. And it was a very interesting thing because I started that while still doing my PhD. And I enrolled in a business program, paid like 15,000 on a barista level salary, which was its own thing, and started learning about business strategy. And I thought going into business that business was, all about strategy, that if only you find the right strategy, everything is going to fall into place and you're going to build a super successful business in no time. Yeah, right. And it didn't quite go that way at all. So I actually had a very good beginning, from literally no audience, nothing, no social media, no marketing experience, right? Like literally I knew nothing about business when I started. I managed to, get the momentum going, like run some successful campaigns, etc., and enroll like 5 people into my first group program, which was my aim. So I filled my roster. I was like so happy. And I started teaching my first group program. And then everything went down. And what basically started happening was that all my imposter syndrome, inadequacies, like all of those things started coming to the surface. And especially, as someone who was in academia before, you are really taught this thing that you should really get everything right. Like every claim you make when you come from academia is like, you have to be so specific, you have to be so careful, you have to document every single thing. There's also this thing of, academia is done in a way that everybody criticizes you all the time. Like people are looking where to nitpick at your research, at things you're doing, and tell you where you're doing things wrong. So I brought all of that with me into business. And we all know business is all about trial and error. Business is going to be all about like actually pushing your comfort zone all the time. And so that triggered all of these, what I now know to be subconscious beliefs, subconscious programs about myself, about other people, about what was safe, about what wasn't safe, about social media. Like everything came up to the point that, I genuinely believed I was a fraud. Like I genuinely believed that what I had to say and what I was teaching was not good enough. And what is a very fascinating thing about that, which I'm sure people have experienced, it, is that I had results. Like my clients had results. My clients had a great experience and it didn't matter. Like all that evidence didn't matter, right? My subconscious was like, no, you're a fraud. Like you don't know what you're doing. You don't know enough. Basically, it came to the point that a year after I started, I burned my whole business to the ground and I shut it down because I couldn't bear all of those subconscious, I call it just subconscious crap. But all of that stuff that came up to the surface that literally was like telling me that it was dangerous. Like doing this was dangerous. I was dangerous. My work was dangerous, like the whole shebang. And about the next, 3 years after, really, it was until like early this year, 2024, I went on a very deep healing journey of really wanting to understand what happened. And I only worked one-on-one clients. Occasionally I did some collaborations, etc. And through that work, I started from both the business perspective, but still working in natural, like holistic health. I started going deeper and deeper and deeper into understanding how important our emotions and our beliefs and the way we perceive reality actually are when it comes to shaping our reality. And it didn't matter if we talked about someone with stage 4 cancer, which are people I worked with, or if we looked at my entrepreneurial journey. I started understanding that underneath the physical symptoms, the external reality, there was a deeper layer. There were emotions, there were relationship issues, there was identity issues. And I worked with many different people, from Dr. Joe Dispenza students to doing different like mindset work, different I did hypnotherapy and all of those different modalities. And I started really learning about the subconscious. But the thing was that while I started becoming aware of some of the things, I started becoming aware of the importance of that, I started seeing some of the beliefs I had, none of that actually helped me clear them. None of them helped me really, really reach a breakthrough in my business. And it took until discovering a specific modality that I use today. I call it quantum subconscious reprogramming. People who may know a little bit more about it, it's called theta healing. It's a modality that goes very, very deep, much deeper than many of the methods I did before, into past lives, into ancestry, into all of these different elements that affect our psyche and our subconscious mind. And once I started using this technique, I learned about it. And I learned also how to actually examine and prove which subconscious beliefs I actually held, which is very different to anything else, where you're kind of playing this game of let me guess what's holding me back. I had some really, really profound breakthroughs. So I basically went from, one of the things I was really struggling with before was actually gaining clarity on who I was in business. Because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I blah, blah, blah. All these things when people are like, I don't know who I am in business. And a lot of people tell them, they're like, yes, you know. And of course, I've heard so many things with regards to that. And for me, it actually took clearing this belief of being a fraud, which was a really deeply seated, like past life energetic in my body, that I actually got clarity in what I was meant to do. Because I learned that the subconscious was, always protecting us, right? Like it's protecting us from something bad happening. And confusion is a protection mechanism. And a lot of people think of like, oh, you should just get it together. Same as procrastination. No, that's not how this works. There's a reason confusion is there. It's trying to protect you from something. And so for me, clearing that belief, I will never forget that, because I was like, going for a little walk in the woods, and then I would sit down in the sun and I did this reprogramming session. And after I found and pulled this belief out, I had a crystal clarity on who I was, what my niche was, what I wanted to talk about within legitimately 10 minutes of doing that. I had 2 weeks worth of content created that evening, whereas before I was talking about how much I hated social media for like literally 3 years. Like all that bullshit we tell ourselves, right? And in the next coming months, I started landing a lot of podcast opportunities, other visibility opportunities, to the point that in the span of 3 months, I got over 150 people into my offers. I landed, I had clients coming to me paying in full for my services, like no objections, telling me that my services were, cheaper than they should be. Whereas before I had people who were like, oh, I can't afford this, over and over again. And so I started really realizing, from also understanding on the level of the physics, how this actually works, that it truly takes changing our identity to shift our physical reality. That in business, strategy is never going to be enough, while it's very important. And I tell everyone, don't try to build business without business strategy, obviously. But if the identity underlying that is off, if you don't believe you can be a successful entrepreneur, if you don't believe you have what it takes, if you don't believe it's safe to have that, there are going to be obstacles after obstacles after obstacles. And there are people I've worked with who have been in business for 10 plus years who are hitting these major roadblocks because of these subconscious beliefs. So this is when I then pivoted, completely shifted my business, and decided I wanted to now apply this and show other entrepreneurs how incredibly powerful that can be for their business. And so that's basically what I do today.
I love it. I love that you jumped into the story and took us on this roller coaster with you of your journey, what that looked like, what it felt like, because I think it's really important, right? Not just in business, but in every area of our lives. If we have these blocks that we're unable to overcome, they're going to become major obstacles later down the road. The fact that you went out, you started this business and you're like, okay, fine, you got these clients, and then you burnt it down. The fact that you identified, hey, listen, there's something more there. I love that. What was it that really drove you to investigate instead of just walking away and saying, hey, listen, let me just go back down the other path and go get a 9-to-5?
I'm going to say this. This is why I work with entrepreneurs. Like, if you know it, you know it. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is something about this path of entrepreneurship. It's either for you or it's not for you. And
right.
Like what I've seen because in the days like day and age when this online entrepreneurship is becoming so big, like, let's be honest, everybody thinks that, they can start a coaching business and make 50K months within like 3 months of starting. Like, the shit you hear online, I'm going to call it out, is insane. And I think that's a great way to like sort things out very quickly, because it's of course not what entrepreneurship is. Even people who created big success fast, like, okay, maybe it went easier at the beginning, but it's inevitable that there will be other edges, right? And this will all depend on actually where our subconscious is or isn't open. And this is why I always tell, entrepreneurs, like, just don't compare yourself. Like, don't base your worth on how long it took you to achieve something or whatnot, because you could take, 2-3 years at the beginning to get to a point that they took someone 6 months to get to. But then from there on, you could be moving, 5 times faster because you've actually overcome like the bigger part, right? And for me, like, entrepreneurship for me is about freedom. It's about liberation from like so many things, right? And it was something I knew I wanted an independent path coming out of academia. I didn't want to be within hierarchical, patriarchal institutions. I didn't want to have a boss who cared more about their ego than they cared about the projects that we were working on. And that was unfortunately my experience. And I also knew this, I think, for a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs I work with, is no one's going to employ me to share my gifts. Like, no one there is offering a position where I could work with others and share this, right? So this is, I think, why a lot of people do open a business today, because they're like, well, no one's going to pay me to do this. Like, let's be real. There's probably 70% of people, at least on this planet, who think like what I'm doing is a scam. So we're just going to run with that, right? That's where consciousness is at right now. But for me, it was also something which I know people who have had a similar experience relate to, which is, I know this is for me. Like, for me, why I was so driven to investigate this is, I'm of course naturally pulled towards the human psyche, and these things that come very naturally to me. Spiritual, work, personal, like, growth work, they are just very like a natural part of who I am. But there is something to be said also about being a person, like a lot of entrepreneurs I work with are, which is, these are people who are oftentimes overachievers, who were doing really well their entire life, who were doing really well in school, who like had, amazing things like on like whatever they achieved in life, it ticked certain boxes. And then you come across a roadblock, like that, and you're like, what just happened? Like,
Mm-hmm.
A, I'm not used to not being able overcoming something, and B, it's like, I know I can do this. Why can't I do something I know I can do? Like, that was for me something that it's almost hard to like explain, but I was looking at it and I was like, I know I can do this thing. Like, what is going on, you know? And I say this to people, I'm like, business strategy isn't rocket science. Like, I studied neuroscience. Like, I know what it means like to work with complex information. Like, business on the surface is not complicated. Like, it's pretty straightforward what actually needs to be done. Then of course there's mastery and execution. There are different strategies. There's trial and error. There's like tweaking, yes. But it's not something that you have to be, you know, have an IQ of 200 to be able to do. Like, that simply isn't true. And so for me, there was almost this allure to like, what stopped me? Like, what happened here? And combined with the fact that I was like, I want this and I know I'm capable of having it. So this was really for me what kept me like driving and be like, I'm having this. Like, I want a lifetime, like I want a life of freedom. I don't want a financial ceiling. I want to be making these decisions for myself. And I want to be sharing these gifts with the world because it's freaking important. So I think this was really like kind of a combined energy of all of these different things that was driving me to just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I'm going to say that I looked at other options. There were times when I considered other options and I was like, I'm never going to be happy if I choose that. Like, that's just the reality. I'm not going to be happy, and I'm not willing to live a life where I'm going to be miserable working for something I don't believe in.
Wow. And that's awesome. And I think a lot of people hit that point, you know, no matter what they're going through, or in my situation, I always say it's like you go through this element of when you have a business that doesn't work out, you go through this element of what do I do next? But you also feel like that next step is definitely not a 9 to 5, because you know in your heart that you're called for something great. And I really believe that entrepreneurship is something great. Like, if you're called for that, if you're supposed to, your job is to help as many people as you can get to where they're going. And invariably, it will help you get where you're going, right? But it's a passion that you have to be able to help people. And I love what you're talking about in terms of being able to tell other entrepreneurs, listen, once you clear this, you'll be able to accelerate at a different rate. What does that look like for the people that you're helping now once they get past that block? Like, what does it look like on the other side?
So what it looks like will be very different, and depending on the individual. I can give you a couple of specific examples. So some of the coolest, sometimes subconscious reprogramming works like it's literal magic, like stuff that happens on the other side. You're like, what is going on? So I had a session with a client, and just like, it was 90-minute session, one-on-one. That's it. It wasn't like a longer thing. And this client came to me and he said, you know, I've been in business for 10 years. I have a business that's doing well, but I know I am meant for more. Like, and he's like, I know I want bigger audiences. I want different audiences, and I want to step into a different form of a leadership. Right. And this happens, like, this is really important to understand that, yes, like subconscious can, you know, quote unquote, block us from like at this early stages. And that can feel really sticky because, like, you know, you're like, why can I not break through, whatever. But also you can be in business for 10 years and then something comes up at that point that wasn't even an issue before. So in this case, it was really visibility for this specific person. And he was saying he started recognizing this classical, you know, patterns of self-sabotage. And self-sabotage is always a subconscious protection mechanism. If you're procrastinating, if you know you should be doing something, but you're not doing it because there's a part of you that believes that having what you want is dangerous for you. So I just like to kind of like, people need to understand, like, one of my pet peeves that I hear in spiritual and subconscious world is when people talk about the subconscious or the ego as being bad. Okay. So first thing, when you're saying anything about your design as a human being is bad, you're rejecting yourself. Like, you're and if you're a spiritual person, if you're a religious person, you're literally saying God did something wrong. Okay. So that to me already is like, we should double check ourselves at this stage. because it's insane. You're literally saying there is a part of me that's a bad part of me. And this is just playing into this cosmic drama of good and bad, that is not really the truth. But what your subconscious is here to do is to keep you safe and primarily to keep you alive. Your subconscious knows based on your past experiences, and that includes, if you believe in it, past lives, and includes what your ancestors went through, right? So it can go beyond what you experienced in this lifetime. And we know from the field of epigenetics that our ancestors' experiences influence our DNA expression. So that's been shown at the level of biology, right? So just keep that in mind that, this plays a big role. And with things like money, it plays a huge role. We can maybe touch on that later. But that means that if the role of your subconscious is to keep you safe and alive, it means that it looks at your past, and whatever worked to keep you safe and alive in the past, it's going to always choose that option over something that is unknown. What that means is that even if something you experienced in the past was bad, like undesirable, abuse, scarcity, your subconscious is like, yeah, okay, but like we made it, like we're still here. And that means that you're directly at odds with, like, let's say, I look at my past with, let's say, money. There's been no one in my entire lineage that's ever experienced abundance. My ancestors went through 2 world wars. They went through famine. They went through communism. They went through like destruction on every freaking level.
Wow.
It was one generation back. You look at my parents, is the first generation that fully came out of poverty, right?
Wow.
This is the subconscious programming we carry. And that's truth for a lot of people. There is no part of your nervous system, there is no part of like your actual biological design that is on board with having a life that is easy and that is a life of abundance. That it probably is also not on board with not being oppressed. So
wow.
Y'all should understand that this is what you're working with. And if you're experiencing difficulties breaking out of your patterns, like, give yourself some grace. Because these things are big. And I really want to emphasize that. So that's what I want you to understand. And this is where you start seeing, a classical kind of trope, a classical thing we hear is how daughters of drunks marry drunks, right? That is a pattern. That is what happens when your subconscious associates abuse and actual physical, like lack of safety, massive volatility in emotions but we made it. And it will choose the same environment because the nervous system feels it's what it knows. So this is a part just of being a human being. No one's immune to it. And we can all change it, but we should also understand that a lot of us are the first generations of lineages upon lineages of people, generations upon generations of people, and we're the first ones doing that work. So there's a lot there. And give yourselves grace on doing this work. So back to the story. So this client comes to me and he's like, I know I'm ready for more. I know I'm ready for different audiences. And I know I should be putting myself out there and doing these other things, and I'm not. Like, I refuse to do it. I have all these plans, like list of things I'm supposed to be doing. They're not hard things to do, but I'm not doing them. And I'm like, okay, let's look at this. And so we basically went through the process where I asked him. So first thing is that I always guide my clients into a changed brainwave state, because to access your subconscious mind, you need to change your brainwave state. So now that we're talking and the person who's listening to us, we're in what is called a beta frequency. So that is when your brain activity is kind of locked into 15 to 30 hertz. So 15 to 30 waves per second. That is when you're focused, when you're thinking, and in that state, you cannot access your subconscious mind. This is why you cannot think your way to good solutions in life, right? This is what Einstein, when he said you cannot solve a problem in the same brainwave state, in the same mindset, basically, that created it. That's what is basically meant with this. So, which is why a lot of people who may go to therapy for years and years and years, they may become aware of patterns, but that doesn't mean they can change their behavior, does it? because they have thought about it, but they've never accessed the root cause, which is subconscious. So you need a process to get into the subconscious effectively. There are different ways of doing that, but it's a specific kind of meditation visualization process that I guide people through. And it's the fastest thing I have ever discovered to work. It's crazy because it can take you into theta brainwave in 5 minutes. And before I worked with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and that takes normally hours of practice a day and sometimes years of practice to reliably access it. So this is really profound how quickly it works. And so we would go together into theta brainwave state. And I would simply ask him, I'd be like, tell me, like, I want you to imagine standing in front of this audience and tell me what you see. Tell me what you see. And he looks at this in this altered brainwave state, which helps us see things from a much more neutral perspective. We don't get into the emotional drama as much there. And he says, all the people staring at me look angry. Like, it looks like they want to attack me. And I'm like, okay. And then there's a process we do, which is called digging. And we look at where this pattern originates. So we effectively travel back in time. And when you're in this altered brainwave state, you have access to memories you wouldn't remember normally. You can look into past lives. You can look into ancestral experiences. For some people, that is very natural. For some people, it may take a bit of practice. But you can see things that are stored in your field, these beliefs, these programs, and you can see what actually created this pattern. And so we went back, and for this client, it started in childhood. And what was basically going on was that in childhood, he was quite a sickly child. And because of that, he couldn't participate at a lot of things with his family. And his family kind of, tried to not include him that much. So they tried to find ways to kind of keep him like outside of things because they felt kind of held back. Obviously, you can't, like, children don't buy that, right? We know that today. So what he developed as a mechanism was that basically he started creating conflict and drama to get attention. And so he developed a program that I need to create conflict to be seen. So his subconscious did not believe it was possible to be seen without creating drama. Exactly. But the thing was, there are some people out there who love being controversial, and they're actually, this works for them.
They thrive on
it. Not one of those. Yeah, for him, not the case. He's the kind of a person, who wants to be kind of shoulder to shoulder with his people, like really like in the trenches, like working together. But he's also like very, calm, kind, compassionate. And so for him, this belief completely contradicted what actually was aligned for him in terms of how he wanted, how he desired to lead. But what is the messed up thing that happens, and this is what we all need to understand, is that when we have these beliefs, for those people who are more into like the energetic part of things, you will understand that, it's your frequency that attracts matching opportunities, right? We call that law of attraction. But each of these beliefs carries a frequency, and it will attract the matching things. And then if we understand kind of what, quantum physics has shown us, is that the way our reality works is that matter comes out of the quantum field. So it's quantum field that collapses into matter. So what it means is that when you have these programs and beliefs in your field, they first attract matching opportunities that confirm that same frequency, and then they collapse into material reality, which is what you see around yourself. So what happens means in practice is that you will see in your reality what you believe. So what was happening for him is that when he was trying to lead in a way he wanted to, people would ignore him. He wouldn't get the attention. And so then it creates this, of course, like a vicious cycle, like a loop where you're like, well, clearly then this doesn't work for me, right? And people then look for ways to affirm their, the limitations. And he absolutely was not on board with that. And so we basically went and cleared that. There is a specific process that is used to clear these beliefs. But we cleared it, we pulled it out, we replaced it with the knowing that it's totally fine, safe being seen, without creating conflict. And we did some other stuff to really clear it out. And first thing is you always feel it in the end of the session, like he had an emotional release, and then there was just this incredible peace that comes with it. But he emailed me a week later, and he was like, yeah, I've been putting myself in front of audiences that I've been avoiding for over 6 months now. He's like, I've been strategically doing this. He's like, I'm actually understanding also what is my way of being seen, like how I am meant to show up. And then I emailed him a month later, just checking in. And I was like, hey, how's their things going? He was like, I have my own manager now. That's like, arranging
What?
these things for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was one 90-minute session. And of course, that was one of those cases where you really see these massive things very quickly. But
Right.
this can happen because sometimes, and we always need to, like, obviously not everybody gets the same results with these things, right?
Right.
But sometimes we will really be at the stage where there's only this one thing that's really standing in the way, and we clear it out and things open up, right? That's like, for me, was that belief I'm a fraud, did that in a massive way. And then sometimes it'll be layers upon layers of really, understanding where are there, because there's sometimes weird, entanglements of different things that we have, that we were conditioned. Like money is oftentimes entangled with sex.
Yes.
It's entangled with power. Like there is, sometimes it will take time to really like separate this and kind of be able to even see clearly what are the alternatives, right? But the beauty of this process is that it ultimately guides you into your truth. It guides you into who you actually are. It guides you into how you're actually meant to speak, right? It guides you into what is your unique way of transmuting information, right? What is your way of utilizing your gifts, instead of emulating others and looking for all this like 3-step process to X, like, and outsourcing your power to mentors and strategies. And this, I think, to me, is the core of what I love about this work, is like, I'm going to be super over the moon if at the end of working together, you tell me that you made extra 100K, like freaking amazing. But I think it's much more important that at the end of our work together, you come to me and you tell me, I know who I am now,
Right.
and
Right.
then things will follow, and maybe, whatever, it may take some other things to get to that external goal. That's fine, right? It's a number of things that get us there. But this to me is the core of like why this work is so powerful. And also, if you're here as an entrepreneur wanting to share your gifts, well, you have to know what your gifts are, and you have to know how you're meant to share them, and you need to know your way of doing it, right? And this is the core of the work that I do.
Wow. Wow. I love that breakdown. I love that explanation. And just thinking about it as you're speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, some of the things, money is the root of all evil, and, all these things that you hear. And I mean, not to say anything else, but even adding, when you watch the news, it doesn't help. It just reaffirms every belief, every story, everything that you've been told. So even when you're trying to get over or overcome or become the best version of yourself, it's oftentimes hard to do that, always getting this information in. My question is, how do you, after you've now gone and cleared your blocks, stay in that state of mind where you don't let those old beliefs come in? Do you continue to practice? How do you help your clients, or how do you get through that?
So, of course, depends on the situation, but I'll give a couple of things that we want to all be really mindful of. So the first thing is that the technique I use utilizes something that's called muscle testing for proving which beliefs we have. And there are specific ways of actually your body telling you which subconscious beliefs you hold. And that's amazing, because there will be sometimes beliefs that come back, and then we know, and we can do clearing again. Oftentimes clearing if beliefs come back, you may just need to go to a deeper level, right? It doesn't mean it didn't clear before, but there's maybe a deeper layer. Maybe you cleared, money is the root of all evil on the childhood level, but only once you've done this, only once you've cleared the first layer of the onion, the ancestral beliefs, and religious programming come up. So that's that. But the big things we want to be looking at is the great untruths. And, the technique I use it has a whole philosophical system around it of how different levels of consciousness work, from creator consciousness to different beings to being a human. And it's very important not to fall into certain illusions about what is and isn't true. Like falling into this, today, is the 6th of November, 2024. For those listening in the future, today were the United States elections, right?
Right.
And it's very easy when you look into that to fall into this drama of good versus evil, to fall into this drama of polarity, to fall into this drama of villain and the victim. And this is why spiritual growth is essential for inner peace. You transcend these paradigms. So the way we work with this in this framework that we use with theta healing, and this is work that I do with all of my clients, is we continuously work on clearing what is called the 3 R's. The 3 R's are resentment, rejection, regret. So resentment, I would say, is the big, this is what most people who go into manifestation are like, love and light, attune to the positive frequencies. I'm like, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at your resentments. You're going to look at how you resent your parents. You're going to look at how you resent your boss. You're going to tell me how you resent God. You're going to tell me how you resent the US president. You're going to tell me how you resent Big Pharma. And then we're going to clear that. Because these are the frequencies that play into this drama that are, it's very interesting how resentment works, but it is this resentment is, well, first of all, it's a protection mechanism, right? Because we are energetically, when you're resenting someone, you're pushing them away. Just think about when you're resenting someone, you're saying, stay away from me. And this is because something in that situation with that person hurt you, right? And you want to prevent yourself from getting hurt again. Totally understandable. Here is the issue. Underlying resentment, it's a subtle frequency identity of victimhood, because you're playing into the narrative of, you hurt me, you did this to me. And while this is a very easy narrative to get into, the more work we do, the more personal growth we do, the more spiritual work we do, we start understanding we are co-creating our reality. That doesn't mean we co-created any situation consciously. It doesn't mean we wanted it that way, right? Because people sometimes get into this narrative of like, oh, it's your fault things are going poorly in your life. Like, that is a useless narrative to have. But you may have co-created it on a soul level where there was literally a contract there. You may have co-created it on a subconscious level where you brought in a frequency from your ancestors. There are programs, and people, those are nasty subconscious programs. But I have worked with clients who have programs, women must abuse me, men must abuse me, I must be punished for my sins. And that's very common. They are gross. Like, it's really bad how, when I feel these like energetics, very like I get sensation from it. Sometimes I just literally want to puke on the spot because it's like so heavy and so dense. But as said before, these frequencies will attract things into your reality. And so this is the ultimate, like, taking full responsibility for our life. And it's not about justifying poor behavior. It's not about justifying these things, right? Not at all. Like, I'm the first one. I work a lot in activism and things like, I'm not the one who's going to say it's all love and light. It is not. There is a lot of huge issues on this planet. And it is useless to go into resentment. Ultimately, it's not creating a better outcome for you. Ultimately, it's not shifting anything. Ultimately, you're simply playing into this narrative to see yourself as someone who's, a victim, so that you don't have to take responsibility for your own life. And there are, of course, layers and nuances to this conversation, right? So sometimes these nuances and these conversations can get very difficult because we all know what's happening in Gaza, and I'm not going to make a claim it's their fault. Do you know what I mean? And there is a contract playing out there. There is an energetic frequency creating reality. And that is the law. That is how things work on this planet. And so we start working with resentment to start seeing, where are we not taking responsibility for our own life? And especially those of us who have the privilege to be doing this work, we have an opportunity to shift that, right? And that is one of the most powerful ways you can stay light and clear, is that you continuously are looking, where are you victimizing yourself? Where are you playing into this narrative, which is telling you, where are you giving away your power? Where are you saying my environment is controlling my life? So that is one of the biggest way, and this is done continuously. It's a continuous practice when we start noticing these resentments coming in, when we get triggered by something. Triggers are a great way to find when there is like something happening that needs clearing. The other one is patterns. If there's a repeated pattern happening over and over again in our life, this is also telling us there is a frequency creating it again and again. But this is something that one of the most powerful things you can ever do in your life is to actually make a decision that you are not willing to live this life anymore with resentment. Like, you desire to let go of it. And this may sound very easy. It's not. Resentment is very, very, very addictive. It's very addictive to say, but it's other people's fault. It's very addictive to say, but I couldn't do anything about it. It's very addictive to say, like, oh, it's not my responsibility, right? It's very, very, very easy to do that. And it's very hard to look at your life and say, I legitimately on some level co-created every shitty experience that's ever happened to me. Like, and this is something when you start doing this work, you really start seeing, because I had to get to terms with certain experiences in my life where I really, really wanted to blame other people. Like, I really wanted to be in this narrative. And it took me a while before I was ready to look at it and say, no, like, it's not black and white. Like, it's not, I was desiring to go through this on some level. I made it happen. And what did I learn from it? What was the virtues? How was I getting motivated? And the thing is that we hold on to these things because we always get something from it. Every belief we get from it. And normally it keeps us in the comfort zone at some level. And as we said, comfort zone does not mean comfortable. That's where most people get it wrong. For a lot of people on this planet, comfort zone is hustle, it's pressure, is overwhelm, is stress, is suffering. It's still comfort zone for your nervous system. But you need to understand that every resentment is motivating you somehow. So let me give you an example, because this is a pretty high level conversation, but it's super important. Women who become feminists and they, embrace this narrative of like, women hate men, like we hate men. We've all seen that. Why? Because using this resentment is giving these women a sense of personal power. So they're using it to feel empowered. And they believe that in order to feel personal power, which was taken from them by men at some point, either them or their ancestors for sure, they believe that without this resentment, they cannot have this. And so what we do in subconscious reprogramming with this is that we disentangle the two. We give you these frequencies of empowerment. We show you can move on with personal power. We also remove any programs of abuse, any programs of men walking all over you, any patriarchal stuff there. But we also say you no longer need this resentment to have this positive quality or positive motivation. And this is why we hold on to it, because on some level it is serving us. It can keep us in the comfort zone. It can keep us feel good about ourselves, but it's also giving us normally something more. And until we let go of that, oftentimes it's going to be very hard to let go of resentment, right? And some people live their entire lives filled with piles and piles and piles of resentment. And it's going to mess up everything in your life. Like, it's going to mess up your body. It's going to mess up your gut. It taxes the liver massively. That's on the physical level. But also every relationship you're going to have, like, it's also going to, on the energetic level, it creates this massive density in your aura, where then means like you're not that magnetic, you can't manifest that quickly, like everything's gone. So this is the way I would say, start working on your resentments if you want to stay sane, and choose not to hold on to resentment. Choose to see a higher perspective. And that doesn't mean bypass your emotions. Just gonna put that there. Grieve if you need to grieve. Cry if you need to cry. Rage if you need to rage. Like, in today's world, there is a lot to rage about. But also, can you, at the end of that, embrace that there is a different truth and that it isn't the highest truth to be in this cosmic drama of good and evil? That isn't the highest truth.
Wow. And that was just the first hour, ladies and gents. Wow. Okay, so that's why resentment is so much. I mean, you're speaking and I'm just thinking about every resentment that, myself, everybody holds on to. It's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have loads of them. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So take us into the other two.
The other two, rejection and regret. Holding on to rejection, again, it's another one of these very heavy frequencies. But the rejection, we let it create an identity of failure.
Right.
And when we have an identity of failure, we'll see failure. We'll keep ourselves small. And again, we are holding on to rejection because we have not actually learned the lessons from it, right? Because ultimately, again, we're even playing into the narrative that someone can reject us, right? Which always means someone has power over us. And normally it'll come back to mommy and daddy, right? That is the a lot of things come back to that. Sometimes I feel like you look at some subconscious programs that you think are going to be really deep, and I'm like, man, it's a mommy issue again. You're like, this is boring. But it's true, right? And we have to look at ourselves. Rejection, sometimes it can be relatively surface level, where we are holding on to it because we're again gaining motivation from it. So we can use old rejections. Let's say we get rejected on a sales call, right? And we use that as a motivation to just drop it, not do it, to go back, stay small, go back in the comfort zone. That is the one that normally it can happen. But then there are deeper levels of rejection. And if we were rejected at the core of who we are as kids, it can create, of course, massive issues around, like, we don't see ourselves clearly. We don't see our potential clearly. We don't believe we are capable of doing certain things. Or that was a personal thing I had due to some, difficult experiences in my childhood. I had a very deep belief that there was something really freaking wrong with me. And so there can be beliefs like I'm a mistake. I should have never been born. There are beliefs such as I don't belong on this planet. And this is that can also come from elsewhere, but it is a rejection thing where we don't actually feel like we belong here. And it's going to create these loops over and over again in our psyche of keeping us stuck in the past, All of these 3 R's keep our energy tethered in the past. So instead of having our energy present here in the now, which is the only place where it really belongs, right? And then being able to mindfully allocate it to where we want it to be, we are having all these cords pulling us back. And again, with rejection, we'll normally be trying to avoid another level of disappointment by avoiding these situations. But really, I would say the deepest level, rejection, is it's an identity of there being something wrong with you. It's an identity of you being a failure. And this is not obviously an identity that's going to create success in business, but it's also going to create massive, massive, massive amounts of heaviness in your everyday life. So that's number 2. Third one is regret. And regret is playing into the narrative that there is such a thing as making mistakes, first and foremost, right? Which is a narrative. Again, if you don't play into good or bad, you also you cannot play into mistakes, right? But that is the narrative most of us were taught. And but again, regret is a very heavy energy. If you feel it in the body, it's gonna pull everything down. Regret, when unresolved together with rejection, can also create depression, because there is just a constant cycling of your mind looking to solve a problem, because you're holding on to this regret and not being able to, and literally starting to deplete your serotonin and other stores. Past regret, unresolved regret will create, depending of course on the person, but it creates a lot of heaviness in the emotional body, in the energy field, etc. And like with resentment, like with rejection, it was trying to teach us something, right? And we hold on to regret not to repeat the same quote unquote mistake again. So maybe in the past, we did something that we wouldn't do again. Maybe we hurt someone without wanting, or maybe we wanted it at a time, right? And we took on an identity of, let's say, being a bad person, something wrong with us. That can be here as well. And then we're going to say, I need to hold on to this regret and feel guilty and keep punishing myself as a motivation to not do that again. Right?
Wow.
And we are also learning normally virtues from it. So we are learning on the level of the ego motivations, right? So motivation, most people have a hard time in life because they think they need guilt, they need self-criticism, they need self-punishment to motivate themselves.
Or anger.
People think that anger, all of those things, we see so many people who will beat themselves up in order to do something. There are people who first thing in the morning, they will get angry to actually activate their adrenals to have the energy to do their stuff. Very toxic, what we've normalized. Very, very toxic. But we are also learning virtues through this. Virtues such as compassion, understanding, acceptance, integrity, all of these things that are actually if we're looking at resentment, rejection, regret, revenge, but then also doubt, fear, as these heavier frequencies that are keeping us in more difficult experiences, right? And
Mhm.
actually simultaneously in the 3D, more of the 3D reality, the alternative to that are virtues, lighter thought forms, right? Which allow us to have a very different experience in life. And so if we look at ascended masters, like whatever you want to call them, but people like Jesus, people like Buddha, those were people who embodied a lot of virtues to the point that it let them bend natural laws, right? We hear that about mystics, like co-localization and like, you know, being in multiple places at the same time, levitating, turning, you know, water into wine,
Into
like
one.
all of these things. Yeah, that is basically what becomes possible when we get rid of these heavier frequencies and embody more of the lighter ones. And we are always, the beauty of this process is we can always transmute the heavier into lighter, right? So we can take a resentment we have and we can always look at what is the virtue I'm learning. And if you're feeling very resentful about the, you know, outcome of the elections, maybe it's teaching you compassion and understanding for your fellow human beings. For some of
Mhm.
us, I know for me, it's been just teaching me a lot of acceptance, like a lot
Mhm.
of freaking acceptance of humanity and where we are at as a species. Same goes
Mhm.
when you're seeing, you know, like climate things that are happening and the decisions our politicians are making. There are a lot of things to be infuriated. And we can also always go to a higher perspective and be like, what is the virtue I can practice here? Like, if I go
Mhm.
to the ultimate truth, everything's connected. Even if this entire world, you know, like self implodes, let's be honest, like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, it really
Mhm.
isn't a big deal. And that's, you know, it takes a certain level to like accept that. But if that is the highest truth, what am I learning? Like, what am I embodying? And then we start moving from this like resentment. And it's important to process it. You know, we don't want to go into like, I am so enlightened, like I am so
Mhm.
full of love, and then every third thing is triggering you. Like that is not how this thing works, right? Like
I
a
I see
lot
that.
of
I see
people
that
do that.
daily.
Yeah, like I again, a lot of acceptance, a lot of compassion, but spiritual growth is not ever freaking easy. And it's
Yeah.
not about being in the love and light all the time. And it's certainly not about ignoring reality. Like, I don't know who came
Mhm.
up with that, but apparently it's very popular.
It is. I mean, it's crazy. It's like, oh yeah, I'm enlightened. So things shouldn't bother me. And I think that's where the disconnect comes in. When you talk to people that are like, no, that's too woo, or that's too, it's because they don't have a full understanding of what it is they're trying to accomplish in order to be able to become the best versions of themselves. Because you can't be a great anything, mom, entrepreneur, anything, student, if you are carrying on or carrying all this weight with you,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Absolutely. And also, like, I'm just gonna say it, man, like, it makes life hard. It makes life hard where you walk down the street and every third thing sends you into a spiral. Like, it makes life
Yeah.
hard when, and I'm saying that as someone who used to be a very angry person, like a very angry person before I did the emotional work. And I'm looking back at it, I'm like, man, that was exhausting. Like, that was so tiring. 5 times a day, I would get so pissed off with something, you know? And I'm like, oh my God, like that was hard. Like, and life is hard. Like, you're always choosing your hard because once you go on the path of expansion, as we said, you're going against your subconscious mind. And
Right.
that's a type of a hard. There's going to be
Right.
fear, there's going to be discomfort, there's going to be perceived risk. You're going to have to trust sometimes real big without any proof, right? But you can pick that, or you can pick complacency, staying in the known, even though you don't like it. Like you're either, and then you're sacrificing your soul's desires.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I would wager, a worse hard in my personal experience. Um, but everything, it's always going to be challenging, but it's just a part of being human. At the end of the day, there's nowhere to get to. Like there's no destination. There is no, you're going to reach one day, you're going to wake up and you'll be like, this is it, now there's nothing more to do. And actually subconsciously, a lot of people are looking for that. More people than know have embraced this continuous process of this is just life with all its
Mm-hmm.
mess, with all its like emotions, with all its drama. Like it's just what being a human is. but there's nowhere to get there. There's nothing. You're always becoming, but there's nothing to become, right? So I think this is just something where also we can take a little bit of this pressure off. And really, to me, ultimately, when we look at this path of doing this work, it's the only path to self-realization and fulfillment, like the only path of doing it. And I'm not talking about my methodology, but I'm talking doing the work, right? And not everybody is here to self-realize. Not everybody is here to have a life of fulfillment, apparently. But you can't get there without this, right? And then you have to at some point embrace what it means to be a human in this world today. And that's messy, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And I wanted to ask you, right, for the people that are using anger in order to motivate themselves by drawing on that actual stimuli. So they're using it as a way to stimulate a method for them to get to the next point or get to the next goal, right? When you're in a calmer state, right, and you've released everything, what are you using to motivate you? Like, what is it activating within you to be able to help you get to the other stage if you're not using those emotions?
Desire.
Ah.
It's that simple, right? I think a lot of people, because we are so disconnected, we forget that life is about the desire. And I'm not talking desire in terms of, a lot of people think desire is sexual, and that's a part of it, for sure. Everybody will know who's experienced it, how strong that is. It's a natural impulse. But our soul has that. Our being has that. A lot of people are deeply disconnected from it. A lot of people were told that it's wrong to have desires, that it's wrong to want things. That is a whole, those are also things like I work with extensively because very early on, you may have been modeled this, your entire childhood. But ultimately, we've all heard it. You're either moving from love or you're moving from fear. And fear is what's under anger, right? Ultimately, if you go a layer deeper, you're always going to reach fear. And on the other side of the spectrum, ultimately, if you go a layer deeper, you're always going to reach love. So those are the highest truths of the polarity that runs this, like our universe here. And you're starting to move from love, instead of saying, like, instead of having to force and pressure yourself, you're like, no, I actually really want to. Like, I'm not using anger to run a business. Like, I want to have a business. I want to create content. I want to share what I have to share. And it's a process of learning, and it's a process of reprogramming your nervous system on a very deep level, right? It'll take time. Like, it's not that you're going to do one session and all the anger will be gone. I've never seen that. But you're learning to move from a different motivation. You're learning to move from your own soul effectively. You're learning to use, self-love. Like, you're also redefining self-love. Let's just clear that, because we've created self-love and self-care, like everything else has been corrupted by capitalism. So people think that self-care and self-love is taking a bath and eating chocolate.
I was just gonna say that. I think it's taking a bath.
Look, I mean, a good bath can do a lot of things for you, but ultimately it goes a little bit deeper than that, right? And self-love is tending to, what do you truly want? And then also being true to yourself. Self-love is also, it entails discipline. It entails devotion, right? It entails grit and perseverance. These are all also virtues, right? To be a balanced human being, you want to have all of that, because a lot of the time people can go, in this business world, we have the whole feminine business field, that sometimes then people will be like, just lean back and receive. And I'm like, but you're not going to build a business by leaning back and receiving. Like, there's the word building there for a reason. Like, it's going to take action. And you may make some money through that process. You can attract a lot of stuff, but you ain't going to build a business with that, right? So that's its own other polarity where people tend to swing into the other extreme normally. That's fine. But ultimately, it's like, to me, I'm like, if I'm looking at my business and I'm looking at myself, I'm like, is it loving to me to build a business that's going to give me things I desire? Yeah. Hello. Of course. Does it also take perseverance, devotion, showing up and doing the work? Also, right? Does it mean that I'm going to force myself to show up every day, regardless if I'm super sick, if I'm like super tired, if I'm on the first day of my period as a woman? No. Like,
Mm-hmm.
also no, right? So it also, to me, this was one of the big parts of, having a business, is like, I'm not gonna work for someone that's not gonna honor my cycle as a woman. Like, we gotta have that conversation as well, right? Like,
Wow.
patriarchy's taking it all over, and that's also a pattern we're breaking here. And so I think, like, this is a big part, is also like this idea of self-love and self-care, and what it means moving from love. Love has also many forms, right? So that becomes its own conversation, and I think it's something that we as humans are actually starting to explore now, because most of us don't know what it looks like moving from love. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, right? I'm still discovering it very actively. I'm still learning, what does it mean to do business as a woman who doesn't
Mm-hmm.
run on a 24-hour cycle? Like, I don't run on the same cycle as a dude does, right? Like, that is objective truth. So trying to run a business as if I did is not loving to me. And it's going to take some time to actually uncover what that looks like, right? Because we are kind of, I'm not going to say we're totally like discovering something new. We do have wisdom, we do have knowing from like other traditions, but we are rediscovering something that we lost here for a very long time in the West, right? And but ultimately we are going to that place where it's our own desire, our own natural impulse, and in an ideal case scenario, love that actually drives us forward. And wanting to
Wow.
share your gifts with other people is love that's moving it. It's saying, I want to share this with other fellow human beings. I want to make their lives better. Like, I want
Mm-hmm.
to serve, right? Service is one of the highest forms of love. And when it comes from an authentic place, that's the actual impulse that to me is the authentic impulse I want to see other entrepreneurs have in business.
Mm. Awesome. And on the show, we always ask our guests, if you had to give yourself advice, your younger self advice, from the place that you're now, what advice would you have given yourself?
There would be a few pieces. One would be just keep going. Like, don't obsess over where you're going. Just keep going, you know?
Mm.
And the other would be stop beating yourself up so much. Like, be nicer to yourself. Like, be kinder to yourself. Um, Time isn't running out would probably be another one. You don't need urgency. I think those would be the big pieces if I look back at what I have to at least a good extent overcome. Yeah, would be actually, don't motivate yourself through self-punishment. Like, that's not needed, and you don't need to rush anywhere. Like, you can take your time.
Wow. Wow. And I know you've dived into so much here and unpacked so much. It's been fabulous. I want you to think of the top three tips, takeaways that you think someone listening to this podcast is on their entrepreneurial journey can really take today, implement to get them from one step to the next step.
Everything that you are seeing happening in your business and in your life has a root cause to it. Nothing's happening at random. And this is, to me, one of the most empowering things we can look at, because there is a cause, and if that cause can be removed, things will shift.
Wow.
So if you've been cycling in something for a long time, especially if you're someone who's been using a lot of strategy learning, marketing, and it's not working, maybe it's time to look at the subconscious. Maybe there is something different to examine, but you can always solve it. There is always a reason for what you are seeing in your reality, and the ultimate reason will always be at the level of the energy, because that is where reality comes from, where matter comes from. So that would be the first one. And the second one would be, if you see yourself doing things in your business, in your life that you don't like, if there are patterns like we talked about, like, from procrastination to blaming others to whatever, just know it's your subconscious trying to protect you. Okay? There's nothing wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're not meant for this. It doesn't mean you can't have it. It doesn't mean you're lazy. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. Like, start understanding everything happening in your life is for a reason. And I don't mean that in the cheesy way, although that is a way we can look at it too. But again, there's a rhyme and reason. There's a logical, actually, like, root cause you can come to that is creating a certain pattern. And because of that, I would say abandon the mechanisms of self-punishment, self-criticism to motivate yourself, and find someone to help you find the root cause of that, to shift it, to transmute it, and to open up the space, because it's not even trying to sabotage you, it's just trying to protect you. So this is the second thing I would say. And I think these two are probably, I mean, if you really like internalize that, you will understand like more about yourself as being a human being than probably 99% of people on this planet do. And that can really, really profoundly shift your life. Tip number 3. Let me see what comes up.
While you're thinking about that, can I interject so you can maybe answer this as your tip 3?
Amazing.
If you are starting a business, right, or you're in the middle of your business journey, right, and you have gone and done the work and you are with a significant other, right, that doesn't believe in, or your family members don't believe in where you're going or what you're doing, what is something that you can do to either protect yourself from their energy, right? So that you can continue doing the work.
Oh, that is a whole topic in and of itself. Clear, energetic oaths and obligations to your parents. The first thing.
Ooh.
So, yeah, like you open a whole can of words here. I'm gonna try not to be too long. So subconscious has programs and beliefs, but it has something that's called energetic oaths and obligations. And these are promises, effectively, that we made, our ancestors made, our past life versions made to certain people. A lot of us have energetic oaths and obligations that we must please our parents. Now, some of us have energetic oaths and obligations that we must succeed to please our parents. Some of us have energetic oaths and obligations that we must fail to please our parents. There's a whole arsenal of those. But yeah, like, I love that question. It's great, but it's deeper than what we were going today. And the same can go for your partner. So again, I'm going to say that with so much love, every person that's in your life, you're allowing them to be there and you're allowing the energy to be there. So if you're having a lot of people in your life who don't support you, we're never working on changing people. You cannot change someone else. However, what we can do is 2 things. First, we can look at any and all energetic frequencies, beliefs, programs, oaths, and obligations in your field that are attracting this into your life. That can be either a person or behavior. I have seen with my clients, when we clear on the relationship level, these dynamics, right? Of like someone, there are programs saying I must be misunderstood, okay? On the lineage level, women, I had that. All women in my lineage carried a program, I must be misunderstood. If you have that program, you can barely blame your partner for misunderstanding you. Again, I say this with so much love. There's a root cause for what you're seeing. However, I have seen clearing these frequencies change relationships overnight. I have seen relationships that had 40, 50 years of a pattern in them after clearing them with my client, their mother starting talking to them completely differently overnight. So that is the first thing I would do. Always look at any oaths and obligations you have, any agreements you made with them, any beliefs, and any resentments, because there's a component of resentment we haven't talked about, but I guess we will. And this is that. So in our methodology, in Theta Healing methodology, it is known that forgiveness is the highest form of protection when you're asking about protection. Why? Because when you hold a resentment, hatred to anyone, you're creating an energetic cord. And as we said, you're learning something from it, right? You're learning motivation, virtue. Well, oftentimes you're using resentment to obligate either that person or another person to treat you in this way for you to finally learn that goddamn lesson. And you are creating an obligation for that person to keep mistreating you for you to learn it. So forgiveness releases that cord. It lets it go. There's no more obligation for anyone to treat you in a certain way for you to learn the lesson. So that is the first thing we would do. Clear resentments, clear energetic oaths and obligations. If you're having issues with parents, always good to look at a parent. Even if they passed on, these things don't necessarily break when that happens, because if they're soul level things, they're soul level things. So same goes with your partner. Look at any energetics you may hold in your field that is inviting this kind of behavior. Once you've done this as well, you can see what happens in a relationship. And if the relationship changes, jackpot. That is the best case scenario. If it doesn't change, you are no longer obligated to deal with it, which means you can set boundaries or leave a lot more easily, because it is very hard to set and stick to boundaries when we have obligations to please someone. This is why so many people have such a rough time, because they try to implement the 3D actions without addressing the energy. And you can affect energy through affecting matter. It's just very slow and tedious compared to the other way around. So this is what I would say. If you come work with me, that's what we would do. We would go straight to the energy and start seeing, why are you attracting people who don't support you? And you may just have, also, I'm going to say that, you may just have some very, I call them basic bitch programs that hold back so many people, which is like, I got to do it all on my own. I don't deserve help. I don't deserve to be so, like, you may have something as simple as that is attracting behavior that you don't want. If you had those programs, it would probably happen with other people too, right? It wouldn't be necessarily specific to parents and so on. If it's specific to parents and the partner, there are probably obligations. So specific ones to parents. To your partner, there could also be obligations with regards to women. So what I mean by that is, I think in the UK, women didn't have the right to have their own bank account until the 70s. Right? Wow. So women were for a long time not allowed to manage their own money, to be responsible for their own money. If there are old beliefs around that, what women aren't allowed to do, if men have old beliefs there as well, that, if a woman becomes independent, the woman's gonna go. Right. There can be other dynamics that can be very old there that can be playing out. Not necessarily. You can also be that you happen to be in a relationship with a person who's not right for you. Like, we always have to look at that, and that's okay. Then we clear the things, and then you can make decision that's the best for you. And if the best decision is leaving the relationship, okay, sucks, but not the end of the world at the end of the day, right? So this is where I would go and definitely look at that, because especially having your parents' energy in your field is kind of a recipe for always being kind of stuck in your life. And I've seen this energy of like, I move 2 steps forward, but I'm pulled 1 step back. And I'm going to say, there's another thing I'm going to mention, because I think people will enjoy that. There is a very interesting thing that's called energetic marriages. And a lot of people are energetically married to their parents. So I'm going to tell you that about 70 to 80% of people I have muscle tested will positively muscle test to, I am married to my mother, I am married to my father, a lot of the times marriage to mothers. And I have a very strong theory that this is actually what underlies so many of, the mother-in-law wife problems on the planet. Right. Because the dude is basically married to both energetically. And then, of course, there's a bit of an issue in a monogamous culture. So that is very present, is very real. And it's easy to clear. Normally, they clear very nicely. And it will help you to actually move forward and have this healthy detachment to your parents, because we don't have actual rituals. In certain indigenous cultures, they have rituals that when a child, when, men and women come of age, there's a specific ritual where this connection as mother and father is transferred from being, having this energetic cord between you and the people who raised you, to mother becoming the earth and father becoming the sky. And they have a ritual around this. So they really clear the space. This is now a new relationship. These people aren't your parents anymore in the sense of, like what the parents' role is. We don't have that in our culture. There's no rite of passage. So I know very few people who actually have like objectively speaking, healthy relationships with their parents. Most of the time,
Right.
because parents never accepted that their kids actually grew up, they still treat them as children. And because children
Ooh.
still, in some level, have obligations to treat their parents like they have power over them. So that
Ooh.
clearing that is very, 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 very big.
Wow, wow, and wow. You know, I just have to say for everyone listening, you have to go and find you on social media, follow you wherever you are, because you are like inspirational. You know, I love what you're doing. Please let us know what's the best way to reach you, your contact handles, everything.
Yes. So come definitely find me on social media. So you can find me on Instagram. My handle is so like Dr. underline Alja underline Podgornik. Like my name is spelled here. I have a very tiny Instagram because I had to restart all over because Meta had some problems with my activism. But I post great content there, so come check it out. Full disclosure, you'll see it when you check it out. I don't hide it. Then find me on Facebook as well. It's just Alja Podgornik. You can find me there. I have a private Facebook group where I do trainings almost every week, and you get any like special access to stuff like reprogramming, meditations, etc. As you jump in there, you can get a free course from me. It's like a small course, but you can experience, like really kind of understand really the logic of the whole methodology. You get to experience a reprogramming meditation, and you get some amazing resources to start working through subconscious like programs that may be stifling your growth in terms of money, in terms of calling in clients, etc. So those are the best places on social media to find me right now. And yeah, then jump through like these courses and so on into my email list. That's obviously like where I update people about all of that. And I am gonna say I'll be also in the next month, so in December and then January, I'll be running some very cool master classes where we'll be together doing like actual healing sessions, like properly, like full scale, for free. You can jump in. And then I have, of course, offerings as well at different price points, different levels that you can do. I have one with regards specifically to visibility, one that deals with clearing resentment, rejection, regret, and some other things. It's called Aura Detox, which because it's kind of what it is. And then, of course, you can come work with me one-on-one. That is the highest level, which is just, I mean, magic happens there. Like there, it's very hard to describe, but if you heard this conversation today or have a good idea that we go very deep, we clear some very interesting stuff. And yeah, I mean, this is really beautiful place to come. And in late January, I'll be starting also my first like group program too. So that's going to be like my signature kind of offer. And we're going to go through like all of the things we talked about today and more. So one of the first chapters we do is clearing any obligation towards parents. So it's going to be a good place to come to because it's really big. And then we're going to address all the areas that are important to clear on the subconscious level for business growth. So we're going to look at visibility. We're going to look at desire. We're going to look at authenticity. So building like trust through that. We're going to look at sales. We're going to look at collaborations. We're going to look at, of course, money. So that is going to be like like everything in one place, like for reprogramming your subconscious for business success effectively. Like there's, to my knowledge, absolutely nothing like that out there. But if that's something where you're like, heck yeah, like I want to do the whole damn thing from the start, that is where you come. And then, of course, after you find me on social media, like if you have any questions at all, just simply shoot me a message and we're going to chat about anything. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I hope this was impactful. I hope you got everything that you need. Dr. Alja, love it, love it, love it. I can't stress enough how much information you shared, how much they should get from this is like insane. Thank you again for jumping on our podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Entrepreneurial Truth. One tool that I can truly recommend on how you can organize and execute systems is Notion. Notion allows you to seamlessly get information out of your head and into a centralized, organized space. Whether it's documenting processes, managing projects, or brainstorming ideas, Notion can be your go-to platform. As a special offer to our listeners, you can get started with Notion using the link in the episode description. By using our affiliate link, you not only support our podcast, but also gain access to free templates designed to kickstart your journey with Notion. These templates are specifically crafted to help entrepreneurs streamline their workflows and boost productivity. To take advantage of this offer, simply visit the affiliate link below to sign up and explore the free templates available in the resource section. Whether you're a solopreneur, managing a team, Notion can be the game changer you've been looking for. Stay tuned for more episodes where we dive deep into strategies, tools that can empower you as an entrepreneur. And don't forget to subscribe to Entrepreneurial Truth so you never miss an episode filled with actionable advice and insights. Thank you once again for joining us today. Until next time, keep innovating and scaling your business with purpose. Thanks again.